Okay, and welcome to Unit 7, Topic 7.5, Unresolved Tensions After World War I. Here's our class activity for the day. So, our learning objective is to explain the continuities and the changes in territorial holdings from 1900 to the present. Now, let's zoom more into the specific historical developments that we need to know in order to be able to explain. Okay, so between the two world wars, Western and Japanese imperial states, well, they predominantly maintained control over their colonial holdings, okay, from an imperialistic age. In some cases, they gained additional territories through conquest or treaty settlement, and in other cases, they faced anti-imperial resistance. Now, let's zoom in even more specifically to better understand what we're talking about here. We're talking about territorial gains. We're talking about the transfer of former German colonies to Great Britain and France under the system of the League of Nations mandates, the mandate system. We're talking about specifically in the Middle East, the Sykes-Picot Agreement between Great Britain and France. They carved up the Middle East, and there were consequences and implications here. Also, we're talking about the Manchukuo Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, in which Japan asserted its influence over other regions of Asia and East Asia. Okay, we're also talking about forms of anti-imperial resistance, more specifically, the Indian National Congress, okay, against Great Britain and Great Britain's hold over India through imperialism, economic imperialism. We're also talking about the West African resistance and strikes and congresses to French rule. All right, let's get to it more specifically. Let's get to the activity. So section 1, you're going to explain what happened to the Ottoman Empire after World War I. So we're going to show understanding by analyzing a document, okay? Either point of view, purpose, audience, or historical situation. Let's take a look at which one. Well, the Ottoman Empire in World War I, the Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers, and they formed an alliance with Germany, okay? And as we know, the Central Powers lost World War I. So as the Ottoman Empire slowly comes to an end and collapses, it's broken up, it's carved up, and you have the Paris Peace Conference, okay, where Germany's previous colonial holdings in the Ottoman Empire, they're split up among the Allied powers, more specifically Britain and France. Okay, so let's take a look at the map on the left. Far left, you have Egypt, you have the Sudan, part of Africa, East Africa over here, and then you move over in the middle of the screen, modern-day Saudi Arabia. In north of that, you have Syria, Iraq, you have Iran, modern-day Iran, Persia, Iran, to the right. So you can see this map and how it's cut up. Let's move over to the right. Well, it was stipulated that these mandates, under the mandate system, they would be overseen by the League of Nations with the goal of future independence for these Muslim regions of the world in the Middle East. But the Sykes-Picot Agreement in 1916, it allowed Great Britain to carve up and control Iraq, Palestine, and Jordan, while France gained influence and control in Syria and Lebanon. Another part of the Ottoman Empire was Turkey, where there was a nationalistic revolution, independence movement. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, he responded by organizing an uprising, taking over Anatolia. He created modern-day Turkey. They were independent under their own control, and he instituted many reforms as well. Okay? What you need to know. Now, let's take a look at some SOAP's analysis, more specifically, purpose. Okay? So what does the creator of the document want to happen? What is the purpose? Why do they want that to happen? What is the purpose, right? We're going to take a look at the document, and then you're going to use our sentence starter, the purpose of this document, right? We want to describe the action that the author hopes will happen because of the document. What is the goal? What is the purpose of the construction of the document? Okay? Let's take a look. Article 22 of the Covenant of the League of Nations, which created the mandate system in the collapsed Ottoman Empire. Okay, so this is a European system European political system that was constructed post-World War I in order to deal with the collapsed Ottoman Empire and what to do with those geographic pieces of land, who gets control and influence. To those colonies and territories which, as a consequence of late war, have ceased to be under the sovereignty of the states, which formerly governed them and which are inhibited by the peoples, not yet able to stand by themselves under the strenuous conditions of the modern world, there should be applied the principle that the well-being and development of such peoples form a sacred trust of civilization. The best method of giving practical effect to this principle is that the tutelage of such peoples should be entrusted to advanced nations who, by reason of their resources, their experience, or their geographical position, can best undertake this responsibility, and who are willing to accept it, and that this tutelage should be exercised by them as mandatories on behalf of the League. The character of the mandate must differ according to the stage of the development of the people, the geographical situation of the territory, its economic conditions, and other similar circumstances. So we take a look at this document created from the European imperial perspective, and we see traces of justifications for imperialism under the ideas of nationalism, social Darwinism, okay, and the civilizing mission. Now let's take a look. You want to find the purpose before moving on. Take 2 minutes, and using the reading and our short comments, try to create purpose using text and typing that now. Okay, here's a great example of the purpose from that previous document. So once again, what does the creator of the document want to happen? Why did they want it to happen? Let's take a look. The purpose of Article 22 of the Covenant of the League of Nations was to effectively grant Britain and France large amounts of territory in the Middle East as mandates, and justify this action by claiming that these territories were not ready nor able to be independent nations. Once again, social Darwinism, the civilizing mission, justifications of continued imperialistic activity. The goal of this document is to keep large areas of land that were once part of the Ottoman Empire under control of France and Britain on behalf of the League of Nations. Okay, so we can see the underlying justifications for continued imperialism and the goal of this document of the League of Nations, which created this mandate in Article 22. You can see the goal here: continued imperialistic influence and activity. What's important to remember? What should we take away? Well, in Section 1, Western states predominantly maintain control over their colonial holdings, this continued imperialistic influence, right? In some cases, they gained additional territories through treaty settlement, just like this mandate system. Territorial gains were made by Western states after World War I through the transfer of former German colonies, the Ottoman Empire, to Great Britain and France under the system of the League of Nations mandates. When analyzing the document on the DBQ, always consider the purpose in this specific instance. Let's move on to Section 2. Section 2, now we're going to look at how Japan increased their territory after World War I. So we're moving from the Middle East in the Ottomans, and now we're going to look at how Japan increased their territory. Okay, so we looked at how Britain and France increased their territory by gaining lands in the Middle East. Now we're going to look at how Japan. Let's show the understanding by analyzing another document is going to be the skill. Let's take a look at Japan in World War I. So during World War I, Japan joined the Allies, forming an alliance with Britain and France, and as well the United States. The Allied powers won World War I. Japan suffered economically during the Depression following the war because they were dependent on importing fuel and food, as well as natural resources. Remember, Japan is an island, a small island that is rapidly industrializing. They need resources, okay? And they did not have enough. Because they were industrialized, they wanted to carve out their own colonial empire, just like the West. So we understand under the Meiji Restoration, under this system of industrialization, copying Western ideas, Western principles, Western industrialization, they developed their own ideas of social Darwinism, their own ideas of self-determination under Japanese nationalism, in which the Japanese postulated it was their idea, their destiny, their right to control various regions of Asia and East Asia. Let's take a look. After World War I, Japan did not get large amounts of land from the Paris Peace Conference. So they sought land through other means, okay? So you can see Japan is far northeast. You can see the island, the mainland islands, and the smaller islands of Japan in red. And you can see all of the other areas of land and influence that they gained here. Through the East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, okay, Japan claimed to want to free Asia from European imperialism. And this was a nationalistic movement, Asia for Asians, okay? But Japan's true goal was really to colonize these areas for themselves. This was really about Asia for Japan. Japan's need for additional resources to continue industrialization. These resources were found in these areas of Asia and South Asia and Southeast Asia, in which Japan was to use their own imperial techniques to take over. And they wanted those raw materials to continue to industrialize. They wanted to create a defensive barrier of the Pacific Islands, okay, to fortify their position against the West. And the first act of aggression by Japan was conquering resource-rich Manchuria in the north through the Mukden incident, okay, in 1931. All right, let's take a look at some multiple choice practice. Right here, you have a link to a countdown clock. You can open up that link. You can put 60 seconds on the clock if you like, or you can add additional time. You can put 70, 80 seconds. You can add a minute and a half if you need it. But just remember, on the end of your test, 55 multiple choice questions in 55 minutes, which breaks down to about 60 seconds question. So you want to get it down to about 60 seconds before the May exam. I'll give you a second to set up your clock. Once you set up your clock and you click start, you want to move to the next section. Okay, let's take a look. So ideas similar to those expressed in the passage above, they would contribute most directly to which of the following. So ideas similar to those, if you take a look at the creator, Yukichi Fukuzawa, a Japanese intellectual, commentary on the current problems in Japan, you would immediately see that this comes from the Japanese perspective, right, of industrialization and imperialistic activity of Japan in Asia. So we need to find a concept, an ABCD, that aligns itself with that thinking, okay? A, Japanese imperialistic policies in East Asia and Southeast Asia in the first half of the 20th century. All right, that could be it. Japan government attempts to mobilize public opinion on promoting the veneration of the emperor in the 1930s and 40s. Japan's policy of demilitarization after the end of the Second World War. Japan's economic miracle in the 60s and 70s. If we're there yet, look at the date, 1881. Let's take a look. Well, A, Japanese imperialistic policies in East and Southeast Asia in the first half of the 20th century seems to be the idea that is most similar to those expressed in the passage, okay? So diplomatic and military efforts designed to expand Japanese and political and economic influence in the region based on the belief that Japan ought to become an imperial power of equal or greater stature than European powers. They were features of Japanese policy before 1950. Remember the areas of influence they gained on the map. And A reflects those ideas, okay? Another multiple choice question, 60 seconds on the clock. You can set that up once again, and when you're ready, you move on to the next section. Multiple choice question 2. The primary rationale for Japan's territorial acquisitions in Southeast Asia during the period 1932 to 1942, as reflected in the map, was most similar to the primary rationale for which of the following? All right, so we understand the primary rationale for Japan's imperialistic attitude. Now let's match it up with another empire. The Ottoman Empire's conquest of the Middle East and North Africa. France's conquest in Central and Southern Europe under Napoleon. The British East India Company's takeover of the other European states' colonial possessions in India. That might be it. The Qing dynasty's expansion into Central Asia. Let's take a look at the best answer. And here we are. The British East India Company's takeover of other European states' colonial possessions in India. All right, and this matches up with Japan because these other areas in Asia and Southeast Asia were colonial possessions of European imperial powers. And that matches up with C, British East India Company's takeover of other European states' colonial possessions. Okay? What should we take away in section 2? Well, after World War I, Japan maintained control over colonial holdings, and they also gained additional territories through the Manchukuo Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. Okay, that was the rationale, the political reasoning. Japan began colonizing surrounding areas for natural resources in order to continue industrializing and to create a military barrier against Western encroachment. They became the strongest Asian industrial power. When analyzing the documents, always consider the point of view, the purpose, the audience, and the historical situation of the document. And we looked at 2 multiple choice sections here. Let's move on to section 3. All right, section 3. We're going to look at India's colonial nationalism after World War I. So there was a nationalistic movement in India against Great Britain. I'm going to try to show understanding by analyzing the document. Let's take a look. Well, India during World War I, well, as a British colony, they also joined the war effort in World War I. They fought alongside the British to defeat the Central Powers. Okay? This is India. The colonized indigenous fought alongside the British. Okay? So India was promised self-rule by the British after World War I. This was a promise. It did not happen. So the failure of Britain to allow for Indian independence after World War I, it led to increased anti-imperial resistance by the indigenous Indian population. Okay? And the leader of that movement was Mohandas Gandhi. He was an Indian lawyer educated in Britain who led the fight for India's independence from British rule. His physical, practical strategy was non-violent protest. Okay? And he took that strategy directly from the Gospels in the Christian Bible for Jesus Christ. His perspective, okay, on violence, this is strictly non-violence. And this was also a heavy influence of Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi was, during the civil rights movement in the United States of America and the Jim Crow laws. The Indian National Congress in 1885 was formed. It was a political party aimed at achieving independence. It was made up of upper-class, educated Indians from India. The Amritsar massacre in 1919 was when over 300 peaceful protesters, both Hindu and Muslim, were murdered by British troops. This mobilized anti-imperial resistance in India. This was a peaceful protest, a non-violent sit-in in which Indians were murdered, massacred by British soldiers. The news spread around the world, and it was to influence people, this movement, to understand the negative impact of imperial activity on the colonized, and it began to work here. Mohandas Gandhi led a massive nonviolent protest against the British, utilizing passive resistance. They call it civil disobedience, is the historical development term you need to know. India did not earn independence until after World War II. So this civil disobedience movement, it took time. All right, let's do some document analysis that matches up with these historical developments. We're going to focus on point of view here, okay? So you're going to take 3 minutes. You want to read the section, and after you finish, you want to type what you believe is the point of view, and then you move on to the next section with the exemplar and the explanation. Do that now. All right, here's our example of point of view. So let's take a look at what is point of view to remind you, why does the creator of this document have this opinion at this time, in this place? So the clues are to look at the occupation. What does the person do? What is their ethnicity? What is their religion? What is their social class? What is their political affiliation? Okay, and our sentence starter that we use in class is the reason for this is because. So that takes the words inside the document and it flows along with the line of reasoning of the person's opinion in this time, in this place, based on their occupation, their ethnicity, their religion, their social class, or their political affiliation, and it justifies and validates their words. And let's see. Well, the reason for this is because as an Indian soldier fighting for the British, Lal seems to be frustrated by the increased discrimination he's facing from other European soldiers, because he's fighting and giving his life for the war effort alongside them and is still being treated as a second-class citizen. This sustained poor treatment of Indians by the British, it helped mobilize anti-imperialistic movements after World War I. Okay? So it's completely understandable why Lal would make these statements. What should we take away? This is what you need to remember. Britain promised to begin allowing for India's independence if they helped the war effort during World War I. They did not follow through on that promise. And what were the consequences? Well, Britain faced anti-imperial resistance from India and after World War I from the Indian National Congress and Mahatma Gandhi in the civil disobedience movement. India would not receive independence after World War I. But the seeds of resistance were planted, they proliferated over time, which would lead to India's independence after World War II. Okay? Remember, when analyzing a document, always consider the point of view, specifically that we analyzed today. We hope this helps.